Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today we're looking at something that's been making waves in the tech world. It's The Verge's decision to put some of their content behind a paywall.
Yeah, this is their first time doing this, so it's a pretty big deal.
Right, and I think it raises a lot of interesting questions about, the future of online media and how we pay for quality journalism and, the age of everything being free online.
Absolutely. And what makes this even more interesting is the reasoning behind The Verge's decision. It's not just about the money.
Yeah, from what I've been reading, their editor-in-chief, Nilay Patel, is really emphasizing this idea of editorial independence, especially when it comes to covering those big tech companies.
Right. There's this quote from him that really stood out to me. He said, "We've always felt really strongly that The Verge needs to report on these companies from outside of them."
Hmm. It's a pretty powerful statement.
Hmm.
So I guess the question is, do you think that kind of independence is something that, readers actually value when they're looking at tech news?
I think it's definitely something to consider. I mean, think about it. If a publication is heavily reliant on tech giants for advertising revenue, do they really have the freedom to be critical? Could they really dig deep into controversial issues without fear of repercussions?
That's a good point. It's
Yeah.
not even necessarily about outright censorship either.
Right.
Right. Patel's argument seems to be that even relying on things like sponsored content or chasing after algorithms on social media can subtly influence what gets covered and how it's presented.
It's almost like a slow creep. You start catering to what those platforms want, what gets clicks, and suddenly your priorities have shifted away from what's truly important.
Then that's where the paywall comes in. I
Yeah.
guess it's like they're drawing a line in the sand saying, we're not going to compromise our values for a quick buck.
Exactly. They're betting that people are willing to pay for that kind of uncompromising journalism.
So how is this paywall actually going to work? I mean, are they going full members only, or is it more nuanced than that?
It's definitely more nuanced. They're being strategic about it. Shorter news stories, those quick hits that keep you up to date on the daily happenings, those will still be free.
Okay, so they're not locking everything down.
No, and they've also redesigned their homepage to look more like a social media feed, which will also remain free. So they're trying to keep that accessibility for the casual reader who might just be popping in for a quick update.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about the logic behind keeping any of it free at all. I mean, if they're trying to move to a subscription model, wouldn't it make sense to just put everything behind the paywall?
Well, this is where Patel's reasoning gets really interesting. He basically said, and I'm paraphrasing here, "I think it's a tragedy that garbage is free and news is behind paywalls. I don't want to make that worse."
Wow, that's quite a statement.
It is, isn't it?
So it's like they're saying, look, we get it, the internet is full of noise, but we don't want to contribute to that problem.
Exactly. They want to make sure people can still get the essential news without hitting a paywall, but then offer deeper dives and analysis for those who are willing to subscribe.
This whole situation with The Verge has got me thinking about just how much free content I consume online. Do you ever feel overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information out there?
Yeah.
It's like drinking from a fire hose sometimes.
Absolutely. And I think that's the point Patel is trying to make. He's not just talking about The Verge, he's talking about a larger trend in online media. This struggle to balance revenue needs with the desire to reach a wide audience.
Now, this reminds me of something I read earlier. This paywall thing isn't a one-off for Vox Media, is it? They've tried this with some of their other publications, right?
You're right. This is actually their third major push towards subscriptions.
Mm-hmm.
New York Magazine and Vox itself have already implemented their own paid models with varying degrees of success.
So it's like The Verge is kind of following in their footsteps, but trying to apply the lessons learned from those previous attempts.
Exactly. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out for them. To fully understand what they're trying to achieve, I think we need to take a closer look at how other publications are tackling this challenge. For example, did you know that New York Magazine recently relaunched their app with a very specific goal in mind?
New York Magazine, huh? What are they up to with their app?
Well, it seems like they're really focused on, cultivating a loyal subscriber base.
Oh.
And they're trying to create this, engaging experience that keeps people coming back for more.
So what are they actually doing differently?
Well, their app gives you access to all of their content.
Oh, wow. So not just New York Magazine itself.
Right, exactly. It includes the Cut Vulture, all of it in one place.
Huh. So it's like a one-stop shop, a curated hub for all things New York Magazine.
That's a great way to put it. And what I find really interesting is that they're specifically trying to foster that loyalty and engagement outside of social media.
Oh, that's interesting. Why are they
Right.
doing that?
Well, think about it. On social media, algorithms dictate what you see, and publishers are constantly fighting for your attention.
Yeah, that's true. It's so hard to stand out in all that noise.
Exactly. So by focusing on their own app, they're creating a space where readers can dive into quality journalism without all those distractions.
That's a pretty bold move, especially in today's media landscape. It's almost like they're saying, hey, come hang out with us directly.
Right. It's a direct connection with their audience.
So does this mean that paywalls are the future of online media? Are we headed towards a world where all the good stuff is locked away?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's a really complex issue with a lot of different factors at play.
Yeah, there are definitely pros and cons to consider.
Yeah.
On the one hand, it makes sense that publishers are looking for ways to, connect directly with their audience and build a more sustainable model for funding quality journalism.
Right.
But on the other hand, it does raise concerns about access. Who gets to participate in these conversations if everything costs money?
You've hit the nail on the head. It's a double-edged sword. There's the potential for greater independence for journalists, more resources for in-depth reporting, a deeper connection with readers.
Right.
But there's also the risk of creating an information divide where the most valuable insights are only accessible to those who can afford it.
It's like we're trying to find this delicate balance between sustainability and accessibility.
Exactly. And there's no easy answer.
So we've got The Verge going with a partial paywall, New York Magazine focusing on their app and building that direct relationship with subscribers. It seems like there's no one-size-fits-all solution here.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating to watch how these different strategies play out. It's like we're in this transitional period figuring out what the future of online media is going to look like.
What are your thoughts on all of this? Do you think paywalls are inevitable?
That's a tough question. Honestly, as a consumer, I love the idea of having access to a wealth of information for free.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I also recognize the value of quality journalism, and I want to support the publications I trust.
I think that's a struggle a lot of people are facing these days.
It is. It's about finding that balance.
So what do you think is the true cost of free information? Is it really free if it comes at the expense of in-depth reporting, investigative journalism, and truly independent voices?
That's a really important question to consider. I think it's easy to take for granted the work that goes into producing quality journalism, the research, the fact-checking, the interviews, the writing, the editing, all of that requires resources, and those resources have to come from somewhere.
It's interesting to think about the role of the reader in all of this. It's like we have a choice to make.
Right.
Do we want to continue to rely on a model where our attention is the currency, where algorithms determine what we see and what gets funded? Or are we willing to step up and support the kind of journalism we believe in, even if it means paying for it?
That's a powerful way to frame it. It's about recognizing that we as consumers have agency. Our choices, the publications we support, the content we engage with, all of those actions have consequences. They shape the media landscape, and ultimately they shape the kind of information we have access to as a society.
Wow. So this whole conversation about The Verge's paywall has become a much bigger conversation about the future of news, about the value we place on information, and about our role as readers in shaping that future.
Exactly. And as we move further into the digital age, these questions are only going to become more urgent. It's a fascinating time to be following the media industry, and I think there are going to be some really interesting innovations and developments in the years to come.
I'm excited to see what happens next.
Me too. But I think it's important to be mindful of the potential pitfalls as well. We have to be careful not to create a system where only the privileged few have access to quality information.
That's a good point. It's
Yeah.
like we need to find a way to balance the need for sustainability with the principles of accessibility and inclusivity.
It's a complex challenge, but I'm optimistic that we can find solutions that benefit both publishers and readers alike.
So we started with The Verge and their paywall.
And now we're talking about the future of information.
It's crazy how these things connect, right?
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion.
Exactly. And I think this conversation has been super insightful. It's made me realize that The Verge's decision isn't just about them. It's a reflection of what's happening across the whole media landscape.
It really is. It's a perfect example of how the internet is changing the way we consume and support journalism. And it forces us to confront some hard truths about, how much we value information and what role we play as readers.
That quote from Patel about, how it's a tragedy that garbage is free and news is behind paywalls keeps coming back to me.
It's a powerful statement, right? It highlights this dilemma we face. We're so used to getting our information for free online, but what are we giving up in the process? Are we okay with a future where the most valuable insights are only available to those who can afford them?
That's a question every reader needs to ask themselves.
Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, the future of news is something we all have a stake in.
And it's not just about paying for access either, right? It's about making a choice to support the kind of journalism you believe in, recognizing that quality reporting takes resources, dedication, a commitment to truth.
Right. It doesn't just happen magically.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into The Verge and their paywall predicament, it seems like we're left with more questions than answers.
But that's okay. Sometimes the best conversations are the ones that leave you thinking.
I agree. And to all our listeners out there, the next time you're scrolling through your newsfeed, take a moment to think about what's going on behind the scenes. The choices we make as consumers, the content we engage with, the publications we support, those actions have real consequences.
They shape the media landscape, and ultimately they shape the kind of information we have access to as a society.
It's true.
Now,
So as we sign off today, we'll leave you with this one thought. What role do you want to play in shaping the future of news? Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
it's been a pleasure.